any wargame, anytime.
All right, everyone. It is another episode of Any War Game Anytime. And man, it's been a pretty crazy week. The summer's coming here in America, Someone was talking about how it's spring and like there's, in Texas, Sam, there's no we're already up to a few 100-degree days already. So it's
Yeah, walked up yesterday and all of a sudden, like in within a 30 seconds, was covered in sweat, and I was like, oh God, are we already back into this time?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So long gone are those days where we would actually complain about it's cold. But anyway, Sam, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty good, hanging in there
Yeah, yeah.
in spite of the heat.
Yes, I do know that we actually had some AC problems, so we're getting that worked on. Luckily, I think that we have like a little portable unit, and I think that I was talking we're going to go a little box unit. And that's just how it works, especially in the South. Those summer days hit and those ACs start to chug, and then they just decide, it's getting around 100 degrees. I think I'm going to stop working. But no, it's good. It shouldn't be too much of a problem going to get it fixed. But who cares about that? We're here to talk about little plastic miniatures or resin now, I guess, right, Sam? Is that the new resin? What do you think?
I,
That's
I'm old school. I'm a pewter,
Peter.
miniature guy.
There's
I
nothing.
love me my metal minis.
And there's nothing like I know some people actually do that where they'll put weights on their miniatures so that they can literally just feel them have that. And like, no, it's like, I love that I still have some old school pewter miniatures. They're so awesome. Yeah, yeah. Well, so Boss is not here today. He's taking care of stuff. And so, generally when Boz goes, Sam, when me and you all get together, me and you, we're the rank and flanks. Boz, really good, but he's more of a sci-fi guy. I think even if he's going to get into fantasy, I don't know if he's a rank and flanker. So, it's good to talk about rank and flank again. Sam?
Yes, and that means today we're going to talk about our one of our favorite systems that has a rank and flank version, but kind of needs some work. So we're going to talk about Age of Fantasy Regiments,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and some things that we've kind of experimented with as we've played Age of Fantasy Regiments, and some kind of ideas for how you would work on the game and whatnot.
Yeah, and this is a response from so last week's podcast. We were talking about some of the things that we'd love OPR to work on this year, and I brought up the fact that well, we really Age of Fantasy Regiments. What a great time to really work on that system, refine it, get it where I think it could be. I would say a competitor and sort of prepare for probably some of the fallout that's going to happen with the old world. I don't think that old world is disappearing, but I think that as it goes into its second year, there are going to be people who are going to want to change systems. And Sam, we do come from Kings of War, which could be another alternative, but let's talk about regiments as well because I think that there is so that's the one thing we want to sort of people have been asking us to delve more into details about what we want to do, and then also, Stan, we had a previous discussion. I think this was late last year with Justin, who's another Kings of War player, and we're gonna sort of continue to refine those suggestions. So yeah, yeah, Sam. So Sam, real quick, go ahead and just go ahead and give a little bit of your you've talked about your sort of path in wargaming, but go ahead and just kind of tell the viewers sort of your history in wargames, especially rank and flank, to kind of give some perspective.
So yeah, I both me and Dan came out of Warhammer Fantasy. So I played Warhammer Fantasy back, starting when I was a teenager, up until my until literally blew up. And then kind of switched over to Kings of War after that. It's kind of what they kind of a lot of the North American tournament community went over to. So I've played in the big tournaments a lot, and I was doing that for a while. And I kind of approach this from a perspective of a tournament player, and kind of what's some of the things you're looking for in a tournament player as like or for a game to play like in kind of a competitive setting is that uh the main less random variants, so like not like wild magic or whatever, and kind of so where you really, when you sit down and you play an opponent, you really feel like, okay, this is a contest of skills between us as commanders, and you want to kind of live out that fantasy a little bit, which is
Mhm.
kind of what we're looking for. We're not playing chess, right? So there is always some random elements, and random elements are very important in games, because you got to be able, but you still want to, at the end of the day, more often than not, feel like you earned your victories, and that's part of playing competitively. In general, is you want to feel like you earned your victory, and uh, rank up in your terms of your personal skill in a game, and you know, so we're looking for kind of a game to do that with.
Yeah, I think so. And the same thing with me. I think I've come from, I started out with Warhammer Fan. I started in fourth edition, or was it third edition? I think it was third to fourth at that time. And boy, I've seen, like, it's really interesting coming from Warhammer Fantasy, and there's something about the rank and flank genre. Maybe it's just its storied history behind a lot of the historicals and a lot of that sort of, that there is just a desire to have a little bit more of a competitive game, even with sometimes the editions in Warhammer Fantasy just weren't that competitive. They were really beer and pretzels games, and the community just didn't want that, right? The community itself, yeah, I remember before Kings of War, there were comp systems going around, and there was just a lot to try to take this square peg, I think, on where some of the editions of Warhammer Fantasy were, to varying degrees. Okay, I mean, you could look at third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and you could, but I think that the community in Warhammer Fantasy, and a lot of rank and flanks, am I wrong on that statement? It just has always felt a little bit more of a more streamlined competitive game. Am I correct in that statement?
Yeah, because you're really capturing that spirit in a way of kind of the general, and stroking his beard as he kind of moves you know things around on a map, and says like, move this unit up here. And it's really kind of the feeling that we're all trying we're all trying to live out in some way, when we play these games, especially when it gets to kind of big rank and flank. The whole idea of a mass battle, and where you have lines of troops advancing and holding the line, and you have flanking maneuvers, and you have all these kind of things. It really does capture that feeling of a general on the battlefield with his troops, and that's kind of it's a mental image that I think really resonates with a lot of people who play uh war games in general, but especially when you get into kind of rank and flank, that kind of mass battle feel.
It's a crunch. It's a system that I think, and I think that when you start to talk about regiments, this goes back to some of our discussions when we talked about OPR. OPR exists, and OPR games exist within a context. They exist within a greater ecosystem. And that greater ecosystem is Games Workshop. It's the 500 million pound gorilla in the room. And so I would say that when OPR, as it's done with Grimdark Future and others, and even Age of Fantasy, they have. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it, Sam. They have tailored their games to be successful within the current context of wargaming, which is Games Workshop, right?
Yeah, that's why they have basic equivalents for equivalent units for everything that Games Workshop makes, and that's kind of what they've designed their units and such around. And but what I think you and I have both really liked, Dan, about OPR is the simplicity of the system, but also the depth of the system.
And the balance, the point system,
Yes,
as problematic as we could nitpick, and I do, we all nitpick, but this is carrying right on our previous discussion, which y'all should watch with the Justin's point system. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, Sam. Go ahead.
But yeah, no, it's in the transparency by which they point things, and that you can very easily identify it. So kind of what as me and Dan have played OPR regiments several times, one of the things we've been doing is experimenting with uh some rules modifications and whatnot, and like as a way to kind of help it along, especially from a competitive standpoint, and if you wanted to take OPR regiments to the next level.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think that's contextually what regiments would need to be successful. It would
yeah,
need to be
because
now. I don't.
it's probably the least developed of the OPR games, and that's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and I would like to caveat. So we are talking about making OPR. I would say a little competitive is that's such a that's for some people it's like a trigger word, right, Sam? That they hear the word and they feel. But
Yeah,
I think it's more. I like to use the term. It's just a little like my view is that you can have fun with these games, but it's always much easier to sort of add in wonkiness. It's and we do that, Sam. We even in Kings of War we would have mega battles or something where you have some wonkiness happening. It's always much easier to add in that fun element than to sort of take it away, right?
yeah, and so if you have if your base kind of system is more streamlined and more kind of clear, and flows very easily, it's easier to add in the fun wacky scenario than it is to add in sometimes the let's fix things. Like you don't need to start with with the wacky scenario. You can add that in pretty easily.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, sort of talking about it, I think the biggest thing, Sam, that I think we could probably get into is the movement system, right, Sam? I think that me and you tried a
Yes,
couple games with the regiments movement system, and
it
it was
doesn't work.
yeah, it was clunky.
It because of the way that, well, especially with charging, where you have to pivot initially, and then move. You get into scenarios where like you could basically be in a line and you can't actually charge anything because uh, you can't actually make contact with, because of how you're positioned. So that, and kind of the 90-degree fit, charge arc, and such is really kind of, I don't think that really works.
It I think it does work in a vacuum. Like if
It
this game was created out of the ether and there was no maybe people, but there is this one,
Yeah,
there's some standards that I would say that
but what it
all the other we think about these games, the 45-degree arcs is really a huge deal in rank and flank, right? And it's
Yeah, because what that necessitates is basically you can't have your units kind of operating out alone. You kind of need to have like a battle line almost, and have kind of your units supporting each other, because if you have those 45-degree arcs, that means there's going to be some things that, like, okay, you kind of need something to cover that angle that this unit can't reach.
mm,
And it's kind of where you create that kind of, this battle line moving forward and things covering each other. And that's so, yeah, 45-degree arcs seems like a pretty easy thing you should, that OPR should do.
And that's contextually too, because and this is something where I think one of the things I think that in the current implementation of regiments, it feels like it's a skirmish game with just they're blocked up. And
Yeah,
it and that's why they do the 90 degrees and like they try to I think the movement system, Sam, works for like a 15, like a smaller point scale. But the thing
yeah.
is that contextually, that isn't what regiments is really about, is it, Sam? It's about
No, you want to have
4,000
mass.
point games.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
want to have mass battles, right? This is the OPR mass battle fantasy system. I mean, because
Yeah.
you already have just regular Age of Fantasy is a skirmish game,
Hmm.
and that's fine. But kind of what both you and I, Dan, and I think others would like is to see regiments be the mass battle game.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think exactly it. It is that context that and it's a context that we that's what we're looking at. We're saying, yes, in other words, I don't when maybe we're critiquing Age of Fantasy regiments, we're not critiquing it as necessarily objectively bad or even
it's
it's more it doesn't fit the greater context of what rank and flank games. Is that a better I know
yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like
and
we're just extra, but I feel sometimes people we have these discussions, Sam, and sometimes people can easily just sort of misconstrue what we're saying. Is that a better way of saying it?
yeah, but people are people. So what are you gonna do, right? I mean, it's I'm the resident cynic here, so I just kind of
Fair enough.
don't
Fair.
try not to worry too much. But yeah, so and it's also like these are things that both you and I, Dan, have played around with as we've played Age of Fantasy Regiments and things that we think work.
Hmm. Yeah.
We've done the 5,000 point games with some of these modifications that we're talking about, and it's really fun.
Yeah. And like
So
we in those games, we've found we've tried some things. Okay, some things work and some things don't. Like for instance, in the last time we talked about the turns, how we probably in regiments would need probably a fifth turn. But
yeah,
but for mechanics of movement, one, I think that the movement systems, the charge there, they would need to be a pivot. A unit would have to be able to get one pivot
one good pivot when they're
at any time
charging.
during the charge.
Yeah,
Anytime.
and that's a really and that's really simple,
Hmm.
which I think goes with the spirit of what OPR is. Like, yes, your unit can pivot at any point during its charge once.
Hmm.
Very simple. And then you solve a whole lot of problems, and then you just go, you make contact, and then you're gonna put your unit. You make
Yeah.
contact, and then put the unit on the facing.
I think the other thing you need is, and this was actually, and look, we're borrowing some things from Kings of War because look, Kings of War, me and Sam, we have
Even
our,
though we've been critical of it, we fell
we
in
there
love
are
with the
some
game
things
for a
that,
reason.
yeah, there are
I
some
mean,
things that work with it.
yeah.
And also in Kings of War, there is a counter charge system where
Mm.
we literally in earlier editions, you just pick up the unit and just turn in, it faces wherever it needs to, and it can just counter charge, right? There
Yeah,
is
which
no, it doesn't even,
that's a
yeah.
pretty that's a pretty easy add too. Is that if you get charged from the flank or rear, instead of some other kind of action, you can do a
Always
counter
charge the
charge.
person that charged you.
Yeah, yeah. So which means you're going to turn and face whatever.
Yeah. And even if
That's
that means moving a bigger unit, like I think even in Kings of War, they literally talk about just picking up the unit and just turning it to face the unit that charged them and basically just, you
yeah,
know,
that's
and
pretty easy. Makes sense. It's not complicated.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, but yeah. So
And those are pretty simple, Sam. I mean, I like, and when we're discussing it, I think that those three little changes to the movement system: one, the 45-degree arcs; two, the counter charging when like basically whoever
yeah,
hits you last turn, you can always counter charge, and then two, really tweaking the charges so you get a pivot anytime during that charge.
anytime instead of at the beginning, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
that makes that just makes it much more streamlined and smooth.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So the next thing, and we brought this up in our first one, but we have to bring it up again. That I think the biggest thing is sort of ambush scout, but especially ambush.
Yeah.
You,
Well, especially sorry demons, the armies that everything has ambush.
yeah, or even scout. I
That
mean,
doesn't work in a rank and flank game.
Yeah, you really. I don't think Sam any unit could really have ambush. It's just not one. Contextually, it's not really what the game is, right? It's just
Yeah, and if anything has ambush, it would have to be like, the Wood Elf shooty unit having ambush is not that big a deal because if it gets on your rear, you're just not gonna get the same amount of benefit from that.
mm,
But but even stuff like that, honestly, I feel like most units that have ambush in OPR for regiments, you could just have scout and you're accomplishing the same
yeah.
thing that you want, uh, and not breaking the game.
Yeah, I think as well, even for someone like Demons, I think that I wouldn't want the entire arm. I think that entire army was with Scout. I think it's just in general a problem, not just in regiments, but even in some of the other games. I would really love to see certain units only getting Scout, right?
Yeah,
Where it,
yeah, that's
it fits the context of the game, which is that you're setting up these things. Oh yeah, okay, you have a few units appear
yeah.
up, but
They're
it's
like
not.
some things are getting,
Mm-hmm.
portaling in from the rift or whatever, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of what demon that's where that comes from in demons.
I mean, and that was even a problem in Kings of War, where some of these units, especially on certain scenarios, could just teleport up and basically do things to just auto win the game if they went first, right?
Yeah, yeah, that was, oh boy, I could tell you about
Yeah, yeah.
about some Kings of War games where the objective was to get across had the halfway point, and I just felt bad for my opponent because I got turn one and
Mhm.
I was already up there by the end of turn one, and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna win because he's never gonna cross this line now.
Yeah, and that's where it does get into scenarios too. And it's
Yeah,
funny, Sam, me and you, we've done in-depth analysis, I think, even on scenarios and how we've just so yeah, but I think that we don't need to get that into the weeds. Um
yeah,
Ambushing, really, and that's probably just doing some custom armies. I really think that regiments should just have its own army lists that don't represent the Age of Fantasy ones.
yeah. And I think that kind of leads us into another really good point here, in terms of army building, where if you want to have kind of a mass, OPR system, right, where you have a unit and then you have the points for a unit like a 5-man unit, and then you can double it to a 10-man. One of the things we would like to do, and we've experimented a little bit with this, and we need to do a little more experimenting with is, could you take a basically a 40-man unit, have a horde or whatever,
Yeah, of your
and and
your mainline
and
troops. Yeah.
yeah, and the reason we've kind of wanted to experiment with this is because, especially coming from Kings of War, but also from Warhammer Fantasy, the idea of having larger blocks of infantry or whatever is always really appealing to us too. So that's something that we would like to work on, either with custom army builders or just kind of house rules or whatever. Uh, you know, Certain units that can go from like 10 to 20, but then also units that can go from 20 to 40.
Yeah, and
Uh,
those would fit. Yeah, and I think that you could easily do, like we've thought about in custom army building, just building a regiment version.
yeah,
So
yeah,
like elite troops could actually start out 10 base
yes,
and
and
then
then
go
go
up
and
to
go up to
20. Because
20. Mhm.
yeah, and then the mainline troops could start out with a 20 base and then go up to 40. And then um we would still probably want to keep those either in ranks of 5 or 10. So I think that I wouldn't want to get into the old world side of things where people
Yeah, we
are
could have a line
seven.
of 30 guys or
Yeah,
whatever.
they'd have to
Just
you have to cap them, and probably really only 5 or 10. That's again
mhm.
to streamline things. I don't think that they're Sam. Do you think they're? I don't want any sort of all that reform stuff that happens in old world.
No, it's messy, and it's along with like reforming and it's the same with removing casualties. Sometimes like you're just wasting wasting time and minutes of your life taking out casualties, or like moving your guys out of a movement tray or whatever. It's like, come on, no one has time for that.
Well, especially and this is something that we really picked up on from Age of Fan because we did that for years. We'd run
Mhm.
larger games, and it really slowed down the game just to remove casualties. And like when we went
And
to
that's
Kings
and
of
that's
War,
yeah, and Kings of War doesn't do that. So you
yeah,
Kings of War either have multi bases or movement trays, and your units stay the size they are up until they die.
yeah,
And it's something that was always that gave you both kind of tactical depth because you could still kind of hold positions even if you took a lot of wounds.
hmm
And it also, to me, it always kind of makes sense that to an extent, to because you're abstracting kind of the time element when this is, so this is like, okay, like these are getting shot at, these are kind of moving, but your guys are gonna like generally try to like move up and hold formation, even if they're getting some guys got knocked out by a bunch of arrows, but we're gonna try and move up and like hold the formation because that's what your guys are trained to do,
yeah.
and whatnot, and it makes sense, I think, and
It
and, and
makes
also
some
works.
sense. I think that I always like to do a cost benefit analysis. What you're talking about, so we are talking about like maybe a unit of 10 has only two guys left, but you keep the models there. What we're saying is that yes, it's losing some realism. Two men probably can't cover the same bases, maybe
Hmm.
10, but you gain the advantage of making the game much more streamlined. If you are going to be playing this game at 4 or 5,000 points, you want to like it slows the game down so much to really remove the single casualties when you can just use dice. I mean, the markers. I mean, there's
Yeah,
tons of those stuff out
move
there.
some kind of dark marker.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and 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 again, it is also like, there we're obviously playing in a turn-based, you know, format for something that's in at least conceptually happening in real time,
yeah,
right? So it's kind of like there's maybe we have all these kind of like these back and forth, I move, you move, I move, whatever, you know, and it's but I'm like, if you're kind of thinking about it like from the perspective of like what this would actually look like on a real battlefield, right, is like all of this is kind of happening at the same time, and then kind of at a certain point things break and then run away or whatever.
yeah.
But it's all kind of unfolding in you know the mental image of real time anyway.
Yeah, and but I think that system works better in Age of Fantasy Regiments where you are counting down a number of wounds and not
Mhm.
sort of where some of the problems have happened with Kings of War, where it's the 2d6 nerve system and it really can produce a lot of wonkiness, right? Either with the double
Yeah.
ones or the
Mhm.
double sixes, and then if you have tournament rerolls, you're rerolling one of them, and it starts to it like
And it was a huge problem that got
it is still
in
probably
Kings of War, with tournament rerolls, because that was a very common thing, and it was introduced as a way to kind of counteract bad dice, right? But what it's almost always becomes now is, uh and it really needs to be changed, is I rolled a 6 and a 1 in order to break this unit, and I need a 9 to break them. Well, now I'd re-roll the 1, and I have a 50-50 shot of breaking a unit that I really shouldn't have broke because it was on a 9,
yeah.
or whatever. So it's like, okay, that's not what that was for, but it's what ended up happening.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like I like this idea of I think Kings of War has something there. We're keeping the stands that people can multi-base if they want to, or they
Mhm.
can remove their models as indicators, so they can use the thing. I sort of come down on it as at the end of the day, this is a game and it's got to be fun. And to me, removing and putting so much effort into just removing single models isn't fun. It's really
Yeah.
and that's where I am always myself personally am willing to provide some extraction when it makes the game more fun. And in a tournament setting, honestly, just from a practical perspective, makes it work, right? I mean,
Yeah, because especially if you're trying to organize a tournament, right? Okay, you want to get a fit your game in this time slot, and then you got to move to the next table or whatever. It's like let's save some time from having to pick up individual models and whatnot. It's like then pick everything up at the end. It's like it's much easier if you can just like, okay, I just got to pick up a whole unit, put it in my box now that it's dead or whatever.
Makes it a lot easier too from a just a practicality perspective. If you
Mhm.
are going to be playing horde armies, you're at a natural disadvantage on tournaments or any game where it's timed. I mean,
Mhm.
that is just a thing. The other thing is I think that King's War brings is that by playing in blocks, you don't have to have 40 of one thing. You can have a multi-base and run 20 clan rats, 20 something clan rats, have them spread out, have them doing something cool, right? And that
Mhm.
is actually making the game, from a practical perspective, Sam, more approachable, right?
I think so too. Yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
it's
Yeah, so we're trying to just so that is just some of the reasons that we really do like, and we've
mhm.
done it different ways. Me and Sam, we've put in our reps with this sort of stuff. Sam, I don't think we're just shooting stuff off the cuff.
Yeah,
I feel we've put in our reps with this.
everything we've talked about so far is stuff we've tried as we've played games.
Yeah.
Of OPR regiments. So we've done some house rule modifications, and we've seen like okay where it works and where it doesn't. Right. I mean,
Hmm.
I think when we first started, saying let's move units up maximally to 40. Right. What we learned is yeah it makes sense for your lower tier units,
Hmm.
but if you put like an elite unit at
Yeah.
40, okay, that's too much.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
clearly, and we've tried that. I think he had some 40-man hammer units at various points, and I was like, okay, I
Mhm.
can't do anything about this.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. And
but
it's and we also even tried one battle, we tried the custom rules, the advanced rules where you could pick and those were just
yeah,
broken. I mean, those were broken. I mean, you can't that those sort of rules where you can double attack one unit for a few is just not
yeah, yeah.
have no place in competitive. Like, they really have no
The
place in the game.
the command point things, I think you could do a version of command points that are really good and competitive and are interesting, but the offensive ones are a little bit too
Yeah.
over the top.
Yeah, I think that me and Sam universally you can watch that game actually, and you'll see it's a fun one.
Yeah.
And so okay, so we've talked about a lot, and what we're gonna do is that we're gonna sort of rehash. So we're gonna talk everything in detail, and like before we end the episode, we're gonna go over things just to make sure that you know. So we're gonna provide some structure as well. But I think the last thing that I think that we found in King that especially coming from Kings of War, um that I really like about Kings of War is flanks and rears are very powerful. They're very powerful in that game, and it provides so much tactical opportunities in the game. Like the game, I think that's what really makes that game that
Yeah.
ability to work towards because they're so power doubling your attack, Sam.
Yeah.
Um,
Now you can't do that much
mhm,
in a game like OPR because of the way the turn structure works, and it's not, I move everything, you move everything because you have the back and forth. But there
mhm,
feels like there really should still be some kind of h- more advantage for being on the flank or the rear.
yeah.
And the couple of ideas that we've been thinking about are you're like maybe +1 AP or plus in the flank or +2 AP in the rear,
Mhm.
or the enemy has -1 defense or morale or something.
Yeah, the -1 morale, maybe both. I mean, honestly,
Hmm.
I could easily see, and they did this in three. I don't know if they removed it, but I did like that where they in 3.3 for Age of Fantasy Regiments. They did try it, and I don't, especially when you deal with some of the ambush stuff. You just take care of that, Sam. I
Hmm.
think you can start opening up. I think that's probably why they don't do it right now because you can play a demon or ambush heavy army, and you almost can't make flanks and rears that powerful. It just,
Yeah,
it's.
but if you get rid of that, like we're like we're thinking of doing,
Mhm.
it's you can go back to having flanks and rears be much more powerful.
Yeah. And then the last thing I think that we discussed it before. If we want to, so let's start trying to tie a little bow around all this and restructure. Sam, a lot of the things we've talked about has really been time savers. It's really been
Hmm.
ways that we can make the turns go much more efficiently. Even with flanks and rears being able to kill stuff better. But a lot of it goes into a bigger point that we noticed, Sam. Turn 4 in regiments, probably too short, right?
Especially for a larger point game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're playing it at 2,000 points, it's probably fine. But regiments, I think, really shines when you're at between 3 and 5,000 points.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really have that mass battle feel. I think at that point, yeah, you need to at least have 5 turns, maybe even 6.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's again a pretty easy thing. And you might even do you could have some kind of system where depending on your points level, you go up an extra turn depending on how many points you have.
Or the
So
scenario, maybe. I think
yeah,
that,
or the scenario, yeah. But like maybe
and they do
at,
this, by the way.
mhm,
OPR does this in some of their scenarios. They do them 5 or 6 turns. Yeah.
yeah,
So this isn't out off the wall. No.
yeah. And so that's another thing we would like to see in OPR regiments is maybe a 5 turn base, and then with possible 6 turns or on some scenarios.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And we haven't got into, like I said, we're going to try and time box this discussion. Me and Sam, we could talk about this all day, and we may do it again, Sam, but we'll definitely talk about it again. But I think we have to talk about scenarios as well because, Sam, coming from Kings of War, one of the things I would say about Warhammer Fantasy and even Old World, I think for me, the biggest problem with Old World isn't the system, it's the fact that it's generally just kill points. And
Mhm.
that to me, like, I think the Old World, it has to me some really novel concepts that I think work in Rank and Flank. I think they're putting out some good ideas, but when it is a kill game, it changes the nature of the game. And in Kings of War, even a scenario based game is better. But really, especially we did a lot of digging into this on the Kings of War side, we really found that scenarios really needed a little more work. And I think that's something that we need to save a complete new episode for, right, Sam, to talk about scenarios, really.
Yeah, I think that's definitely gotta be its own episode probably because
Yeah.
there's a lot to dig into there, and uh kind of the pros and cons of having like how much do you weight scenarios versus kill and whatnot, and that's a complicated topic that I think requires
Mhm.
uh some more in-depth discussion.
I think that's good though that at its base, OPR is at its very base a scenario based game, and that's very
Mhm.
good from because coming from Warhammer Fantasy and over, which are really primarily kill games, it changes the nature of the game
Yeah,
where
because
it
then
makes
it's about positioning
hmm
and about kind of holding territory on the
yeah
battlefield, and not just we're gonna just walk up and smash each other, and whoever rolls better is gonna win,
and
and
that's an
whoever.
ideal scenario. I mean,
Yeah.
go watch some old world, watch the Warhammer Fantasy games. Shooting armies are just going to stay at the very back of the field, and it's sort of. I hate to say it. Some of those games I've watched them and it reminds me of my fantasy game where it's like this game's sort of boring because it's just
Yeah, because your enemy just sits back. If you're playing against a gunline army where it's just like I'm just, you know, a bunch of dwarf artillery, and so then a couple of hand to hand units. There's just in case you get close enough,
mhm,
and it's like okay, this is just what am I even doing here?
yeah yeah
Just I walk, first 3 turns I walk up and get shot, and then by the time I'm in charge range, like I don't even have anything left.
yeah. And I will time box and it's funny I brought this up. One of the reasons, Sam, we felt timely to have this discussion now is because in our previous episode, we know Sam, like all of us, we're all busy. Sam was looking for the millionaire, didn't find him. But during that discussion, I brought up the point, and I think that I feel you can speak for yourself, but I think that you would agree on this in saying that it's very pivotal that Age of Fantasy regiments be refined this year because towards the end of this year, Old World and some of these other rank and flank games,
Yeah,
they
the
are
king.
going to
Mhm.
start showing their wear and they're going to get, especially Old World. the honeymoon phase is going to leave.
Yeah, but and so between old world kind of, people leaving that, and also uh I'm still thinking that there's going to be an exodus of Kings of War at some point too,
This would
because
be
the
attrition. I
games
mean,
the
it's certainly going
yeah
to be
mhm.
attrition in Kings of War.
Yeah,
We've seen
the
it. I
game,
mean,
the games, yeah, because Kings of War's not really in a great place right now, and it doesn't seem like it's getting better. So that's
mhm.
unfortunate, because that's a game that I very much love. But I've been now focusing more of my efforts onto OPR, because just Kings of War Third Edition has just not been very good, and they're probably not getting a fourth edition. Definitely not this year. Probably not even next year at this rate. So
And even if you like Kings of War, there is going to be a natural attrition
mhm,
that just sort of happens just in general. Kings of War is actually a little older game now.
yeah.
And to me, the game hasn't, whether you like the game or not, I would say this, the game hasn't really changed enough to keep people interested in it.
Well, I think see. I think it's changed
Well,
too
not,
much.
not
I liked the second edition Kings of War.
I think it's changed in a way that has, I would say it's changed to sort of preserve a certain way of playing that
That's yes.
the corkscrew, I go back to it. The
It's changed.
corkscrew is a rule that I don't understand why it's there.
Yeah.
I don't get why, but I feel that people, well, I'm not, I was just saying, it feels like there's just this inertia that people are used to playing with this corkscrew. And if you don't
Well,
know what
and
the corkscrew is, don't even bother worrying about it, because
it's
it
a bad rule.
don't like it just
It's
yeah,
a rule it's a gotcha rule.
yeah.
And it gets kept in every time they make changes, because it's like the players who are getting people with it
Yeah.
like it. And it's yeah. So it's Kings of War is not a very new player friendly game, I think.
Yeah. So for me, but the big thing I think that is the old world. The old world has gotten a lot of players into the rank and flank, either new or existing. And there will be some attrition, especially with GW doing the latest price hike where they jacked up old world. I mean, I
Mhm.
just got my old world book, Sam, after 2 or 3 months. I just got it this past week. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
finally.
So the production issues, but so
Yeah.
there are going to be some attrition there. And I think that
And so OPR has a good
it's
opening here, right?
it's an
Because
opportunity. Yeah.
as
To
that there's some interest in there's a renewed interest in rank and flank tactics,
Mhm.
and there's going to be some kind of fallout from the old world. Like, this is a good time
Mhm.
to be working on Age of Fantasy Regiments, because if it's set up as a I think if it's set up as a kind of really viable alternative, I think that it's something that people uh can kind of latch onto, like you and I, Dan, have latched onto it, because it's we like the core of the system. And both you and I, when we first started doing OPR and OPR regiments, we looked at it and says, like, this the core of this is really good. It needs some work,
and, and
but
and
it's really appealing.
and
And
let's
it's
be honest, Sam. It took a lot for me to get you the fact that
I
Sam is talking about OPR regiments now.
when we
Last
first
year,
yeah,
Sam,
yeah.
you really just you. I mean, if
I
it
couldn't
convinced
imagine. I
you,
couldn't
Sam,
imagine.
yeah, if
Mhm.
it convinced you, Sam, I mean, it's a good system because you were not at first, Sam. You just were not interested. Am
Yeah,
I correct in that?
Dan was much more inclined to, like, I want to play a bunch of different things and whatnot. And I was like, I want my Kings of War,
Uh
or
huh.
whatever it was. And but then, as I've kind of like, I don't remember how, but you wore me down over the course of a couple months of,
But you also
like,
tried it. You
I did.
tried it.
I tried it, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually
Yeah.
actually a really good system. So
And
yeah.
I also want to say this as we close out. We have, I guess, like, okay, some people may say that we're only just critical. Here's what I would say: we're critical, but you have to understand the greater context. We see so the reason we're saying these things, Sam. We see so much in OPR that they have going for them. They're not a model-based system. They're not trying to make the new power armies. They have a point system that has generally made the armies generally balanced, a lot better than just what we talked about last time with Kings of War, just sort of the arbitrary nature of points happening in, Kings of
Yeah,
War
and
and
there's
fantasy.
but yes, having kind of a formulaic point system that's accessible to everybody. Anybody can go on the custom army builder and see exactly how things are pointed. And is it perfect? No, it's never going to be perfect, most likely. But it's like it's just kind of not possible to do that and on a certain level. But it's transparent though, and that's a huge plus. And because it's transparent and because it's manipulatable by players, right? If there is something that's kind of broken or whatnot, it's you can both see it and fix it
Yeah.
much easier.
And so that just we want to preface that we see there's so much going for OPR that yes, we would like some changes that we're thinking about. And by the way, Sam, some of these changes we still need to tweak. We still like we're gonna start trying to try some of this thing
And if our and if you kind of listeners have some ideas of maybe things
yeah.
that you've tried, pass them along. Maybe we'll try them in some of our games and whatnot, or give them some thought, because we're not perfect and we haven't thought of everything, and we may have missed things as well. So
Yeah. So with that in mind, and I think so, let's just run through a few things. One, so we'll sort of close this out with sort of a recap. One, I think so the first thing we would think, Sam, some movement tweaks, 45-degree arcs, a counter charge rule, basically that you can always charge someone. That's pretty straightforward. And then some charging rules, which is a tweak, right? Where you can just get a pivot anytime during a charge. I think
that's
pretty
pretty simple. Yeah, redoing ambush, either removing ambush or redesigning it. And scout to a lesser extent, but really ambush. Yep, another thing.
But that's just moving. That's just basically rebuilding some of the armies and then removing that rule. Okay, there
Yeah.
you go. I think the other thing is,
And when we talked about having the reasons for having like an army builder that you can do that with, why it's so important is both you and I, Dan, could basically go and redesign the demon army, and it would take a little, take an hour or whatever, and just remove ambush. And since that's calculated in the system, we can, okay, this is the new points of this unit without
their
the ambush
daemon
rule.
roll. Yeah,
or whatever.
and give it to certain. Yeah, just exactly. Like it's not. I don't think that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
So another tweak we talk about is that when you can get rid of the ambush thing, all of a sudden now you can bring back some power into flanks and rears, making those more impactful. -1. No, I'm sorry. Maybe -1. Wait, well, -1 def +1 HP is the same thing. But really, did we add in the -1 morale like they did do? +1 AP, like all that can be tweaked, Sam, about how effective do we want ranks. Some combination.
And that's
of
something that I feel
yeah.
like needs some playtest, needs some more in-depth playtesting. But yeah, that's a thing that we want to toy around with for a little while.
Yeah. Army building as well. I think a pretty simple thing is for elite troops. You could do this already in the army builder. You just create a bigger version of the unit that, like I said, elites can start out at 10, go up to 15, 20, and or maybe just 10, 20. I mean, that again, we can tweak.
20,
It's not, yeah. And then the mainline troops can go up to 40. And then again, maybe do a 10 wide or 5 wide. That could something we've played around with that, Sam, and it works. I mean,
it
maybe
works.
It needs some tweaks. We could tweak
it.
it.
It needs some tweaks because you can't do it with everything, but it for your main your peasant spearmen being able to do 40 wide is nice. So.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that we'd be talking about change-wise, Sam, is just making it so that models aren't removed on a per model basis. And it's just sort of what we do at Kings of War, where a regiment, like a troop, is just basically a block that stays the same dimensions no matter how many wounds, and just removed automatically. And that's just all to basically make the game flow a lot better, so that we can ultimately move this up to a 5 or a 6 turn game. Right?
Yes. So that's kind of our recap here.
Okay. And so anyway, so like I said, we could talk about this all day. We are going to start doing some testing. I know me and Sam, like all things, Sam, we try to fit all these things in, but we continue, and we're going to continue to do some work on this year. Sam, I think that we would love, with just our viewers' input, we would love to sort of get a competitive regiment system out there with some. I think that's reasonable, right? It's not
Yeah, we could put together
even a
like
first draft.
first draft of a kind of tournament pack or two. And so again, if you guys have any ideas for things you think would work, feel free to pass them along in the comments, uh, or whatnot as well. So
Hey, thanks a lot, everyone, and Sam.
go where the game is good, guys.
Thank you so much.
Any war game, anytime.